Welcome to The Watcher. I'm your cult leader, Tom Pot, and I just watched the finale of Hawkeye. And when I say I just watched it, I mean I watched it, the day it came out. But it was Christmas, so I took some time. I wasn't going to be a Mr. Scrooge and say, oh, you have to work on Christmas or you're out of a job. I mean, I guess I'd be telling myself that in that scenario. But yeah, I took a bit of time. I put out my own Christmas special if you want to check that out. And I've really now had a bit of time to dissect the finale of Hawkeye. Right up top, let me say a few things. Number one, I don't watch other YouTube breakdowns. I just do my own thing because I don't want to just be stealing points or kind of regurgitating what I've heard others said. But I have heard people say that some Hawkeye breakdowns are spoiling No Way Home. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to mention No Way Home at all. So you're safe here if you haven't not seen the latest Spider-Man. It seems like everyone has seen it, but all the same, we'll play it safe. The other thing I want to say is that this is around the time last year where we started The Watcher for WandaVision, nearly a year now. And I'm happy to say we're going to keep it going even though we don't know what's in store for the Disney Plus shows. The dates are kind of all over the place. I'll talk about that again at the end. But, it's all good. And I will say before we get into the episode, how much I liked the episode but didn't love the episode. I'll give my thoughts on the show overall, maybe what's coming next, and a lot more at the end of the video if you do want to skip to the end before we do our recap. And look, I did think it was a good finale, but I also think it was exactly what we expected it to be. And I think that's a problem that's kind of emerged in a lot of these Disney Plus shows. It feels like we know the end point a lot of the time, and I thought this was maybe the worst example of that. But we'll go through it, we'll do a bit of a recap. As I said, I did like it, but we'll give clearer thoughts, and then speculation on the future towards the end. So, our reveal at the end of the last episode was the Kingpin. I was very underwhelmed by that reveal, as I mentioned, because it was literally like a fuzzy picture on a phone screen. Like, wow, that's it, he's back, baby. It was strange way of revealing it. I would say, though, thankfully, I was worried we wouldn't get a lot of Kingpin in this. He's in it a lot, man. He was there, you know what I mean? And I'm glad he was. The episode as well, one of the concerns I had going into it was the idea that there was a lot to fill in and not a lot of time to do it. And I kind of was worried after the 5th episode. I was like, oh, they didn't really, figure anything out in that episode. I'm really hoping they can wrap it all up in one. This was the longest episode, longest finale of any of the Disney Plus shows, which is surprising for a show, I think, that has been more muted in the response than a lot of the other shows. I think a lot of people haven't necessarily been watching Hawkeye the same way we did WandaVision or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I don't know is the same anticipation there, which is a shame because I do think it has been a great show. But Kingpin is in this, and I do want to talk about Vincent D'Onofrio, what he's kind of said about his return as Kingpin, because he's been very chatty, more chatty than anyone else in the show, I think, about coming back. And can you blame him? I mean, it's been a while since he's been this character, and it seemed like it could have not happened at all. But he said that he's playing the same version of the character. And the thing about this is we're at a strange point now when they are, folding in characters from other universes and making certain things continuity-wise, bringing it into the MCU. Netflix shows especially now is what we're talking about here. And the question about that is everything canon? Are some things canon? Is this like... The way Vincent D'Onofrio has said it, I know he said Wilson D'Onofrio. He's that good. Vincent D'Onofrio has kind of said this is the same version of the character. Now, some people are taking that very much on face value. He's like, yeah, well, this is the person who did this and this. Maybe, but also it kind of sounds a little bit like when he says it's the same version of the character, it sounds to me like he's saying I'm playing the character the same way. And it definitely feels that. There's one moment especially where I literally just wrote, fucking D'Onofrio is good, isn't he? When he's talking about Maya and he's like, my Maya. And you're like, ooh, yeah, get on. Yeah, I'm glad you're back, baby. So it's kind of great that he is. But the question is we still don't know about the character's history. Because, of course, the Netflix shows were their own thing. And I don't mean that continuity-wise. I mean that tonally, they were very different. Quality, they were probably very different in some ways. They were allowed to go darker. And I don't know how much Marvel are going to bring that into the fold. Is it going to be a very loose continuity? He said basically that his version of Kingpin, the way it was pitched to him is that he was... Like, during the blip, he basically lost everything. Now, I'm assuming what he's saying there is he was blipped. And he was basically, he was the king of the underworld, then he got blipped. and he lost his foothold. And that basically the way he said it is that he's now trying to come back and rise to the top again, which is a very interesting way to put this character. It means we sort of get, his rise again. And I think what's really actually good about the blip, and it's something I hadn't thought about at the time because we didn't really need to consider it, but for opportunities like this, it does offer a chance to totally reset things. And it does feel like they've reset the Kingpin here into a more comic booky form, which is what would suit the MCU more in the Netflix shows. But we still don't know exactly how much the Netflix shows are going to be canon. Are we going to get more MCU characters from the Netflix shows brought into the main continuity? Is their past going to be addressed all that much? We don't know. We also don't know if Daredevil was blipped in that time. So does that mean that when Daredevil comes into the MCU, is it going to be a case that they did have this long history? Is the Daredevil we see, maybe if he wasn't blipped, is there a chance that he has now moved on 5 years' time and that he's basically become a more comic booky version of Daredevil, less gritty and more kind of fun and playful? Because the version we get of Kingpin is very comic booky. He has a white tuxedo. He has a diamond cane, which he does in the comics as well. I don't believe he ever got the diamond cane in the Netflix shows. He certainly wore white tuxedos a lot. But anyway, he's not overly big, which was a concern. A lot of rumors were saying that he was going to be like Into the Spider-Verse big, which he wasn't. Thankfully, I would say. But he definitely was much more resilient and tougher and almost more invincible. So basically the question we had was, why is Kate's mom doing this? Is she a villain? We all suspected she was probably the villain. Very obviously, I think it turned out that she was, because they hit it so hard that it was going to be Jack that it couldn't have been Jack. But basically Kate's father, her husband, owed a lot of money to the Kingpin, and she had basically no choice. She says she killed Armand, but now that Jack is taking the fall and Kate is home and kind of piecing things together, that we need to call off our deal. I can't be involved in this business anymore. And Eleanor basically wants out of her deal with Kingpin. Interestingly, and it's never brought up again, I wonder if it will come up again at some point. She says that she has an insurance policy, documenting everything. Copies of everything is what she says. I love again this line by Fisk as well when he says, in the spirit of the holidays, I'm going to give you a minute basically to reconsider. It's a kind of cool gangster thing we have. And as I also wrote this, and this was before D'Onofrio came out and said what he said. I said, I'm assuming this is one of Fisk's lesser businesses because he's like in a scrapyard or whatever. Because I normally picture him in skyscrapers. Some people had speculated that Avengers Tower was going to be a Fisk thing. But no, it definitely adds to the credence that the Kingpin here has lost everything and he's building his way back up. So then we have Kingpin meeting Maya. She tells him that she's kind of done chasing Ronan because it won't bring her father back. And essentially then it kind of feels like he talks to Cassie and he's like, bring it to an end, Clint realizes the dangers ahead and they start making trick arrows again. We get a lot of different trick arrows in this episode again, which is fun because last time he said that he didn't know if he could do other trick arrows, but he can apparently make them himself. Then Clint and Kate go to a party to confront Kate's mother. So everyone's going to be at this party and it's going to be very dangerous. Clint asks Kate to assess the situations, including, the threats and the assets, which is cool. Again, we are getting that kind of mentor-mentee relationship between them, especially in this episode. It certainly feels like it got us to that natural endpoint, which probably raises a doubt that there will be a season 2. The only show that's getting a season 2 confirmed is Loki at the moment. So who knows, but that'll come up in a future discussion later on. All of our LARPers are also in this. The waiters, they're pretending to be waiters. The LARPers are an interesting aspect of the show because I feel like I don't know if they really were needed in the show. I'm not sure if they entirely worked. I will mention as well Grills, whose name I mess up a few times. I think I called him Grizz. Grills actually is a character in the comics, but I totally forgot. I'm rereading Matt Fraction's run of Hawkeye because, I do my research. I do my due diligence. Another reason why you should like and subscribe. Well, hey, I nearly forgot to say that. But he's a very different character in the comics, so I guess that's why I didn't make the connection. But he's there as well, of course, our kind of star LARPer, I suppose. Jack is out of jail now and he's walking around a party with a sword on his hip, which is pretty funny to be like, yeah, I killed him out with a sword, but I've got a sword now and I'm innocent, baby. Which is brilliant, but they acknowledge that as well. We also have an amazing interaction. I think is it Armand the 7th? We see is a little kid that was talking to Armand the 3rd in the first episode. And he's like, oh, like just a snobby trust fund kid, you know, where he's like, oh, mother told me I was going to get your wine collection when you're in prison. And he was like, oh, well, you're not old enough to appreciate it. He was like, oh, well, I will appreciate by the time you die anyway. Haha. And he's like, do you remember that time you pissed your pants in the Hamptons? Because we all do. I'm just like, Jack is amazing, God. I'm sorry if we ever disparage you, Jack. You're a king. Kazi is watching all of this party as well through a sniper rifle, we should say. And at the same moment, Yelena is showing up. So all the chickens are coming home to roost right now. Kate confronts her mom, saying she had no choice after her father left them in debt. So again, Kate's mother isn't the kind of an out-and-out villain. They're making her some degree sympathetic, as we suspected. But again, probably a character we're not going to see really again. There's really no need, I would say, for her to show up again. Kazi starts opening fire, but of course he has a laser sight on his rifle, as we always do in movies. It seems totally overused as a trope, but he knows the laser sight, and because he's able to duck down. Kate gets her mom and Jack to safety and tells her mom to stay put. Of course, she does not. She just wanders off, leaving Jack to just say, what am I going to do? And then he says, it's time to shine. And he draws his sword and readies himself for battle. Really cheesy. Really awesome, though. So in that moment, Kate is running to kind of, get her bearings. And she meets Yelena. Again, I highlighted this in the last episode. The relationship between Yelena and Kate is awesome. You want more of these characters together straight away. Again, it is, George Lucas moment.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
It's the new Hawkeye meeting the new Black Widow. And again, they have that really great, really fun chemistry, which really enjoying, because it basically, it's like, she's like, hey, it's good to see you, Kate. And Kate actually likes Yelena, really. Which at one point she's like, stop making me like you. And he's like, I can't help it. But they're getting into the elevator, and it's so funny, like, they're just very childishly trying to stop each other. Like, well, Kate is trying to childishly stop Yelena. And again, it shows their backgrounds, I think, and their upbringing. Like, Kate is kind of a rich kind of kid that, was a little bit spoiled, probably a bit pampered. Yelena is this hardened assassin. So Kate is like, I'm gonna press the button on the elevator. And she's like, get that out of there. Slapping her hand away. Or just, just awkwardly tussling with each other. It's really, really fun. But yeah, they get in the elevator. They're fighting away. And we get a really fun moment as well with the reveal of the Kate Bishop costume, where they're kind of fighting, and it's like a tearaway clothes she's wearing, and she kind of twirls away to escape Yelena, but also reveal her new costume. And and of course, it is so cheesy that Yelena has to acknowledge it. She's like, did you plan that? She's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, well. Again, I think what's strange about this, and it's bound to be a bit of a letdown, is that with the other episodes of the MCU shows, and I mentioned this last week, I was like, they're all going to get a new costume, of course, because that's every episode of these now ends with a big battle, and they get our new comic accurate costume. The thing about Hawkeye's costume, which we'll get to in a minute, and Yelena's costume, is the fact that their costumes just aren't interesting. Like, unless they made a big deal of it, you'd probably just say, oh yeah, it's Kate's clothes she's been wearing the whole time. Yeah, it's like the purple thing. Again, it's kind of got a little logo on it, but I think, but that's kind of it, because it's not a very interesting costume, so it doesn't lead to that big like moment. Because of course, like in WandaVision, we got oh wow, Wanda looks like the Scarlet Witch now. Oh wow, Anthony Mackie is Captain America now with the wingsuit. This time it's like, oh, she's wearing a Hawkeye logo, I guess. But it is what it is. They're fighting away. And because Kate has pressed all the buttons, they race to the 12th floor where Clint is, and they have to run now. They're kind of tussling and throwing each other, fighting away. It's just really fun. Kate is kind of showing that she's often outmatched, but Yelena is also not taking her too seriously. They are on the 12th floor now, they're not on the 12th floor yet, but on the 12th floor, Clint is fighting off the Tracksuit Mafia, including Kazi. He takes out Kazi as a sniper. He puts kind of a smoking arrow in there. And then, they're having a bit of fun, a bit of banter, Kate and Yelena are. And Yelena's like, okay, that's enough of that. So she fires a kind of a, I don't know, I guess we call it not an abseiling cord, a wire, I guess. She basically mounts a wire and starts rappelling down the building, literally running down the face of the building. And she tries to shoot at Clint and misses, I guess. Which was kind of like, it was a weird, like I would have preferred a moment there that didn't make Yelena just look a little bit, less of a badass than she is. I mean, it was like, wow, she rappelled down the whole building. Oh man, how, like, she can do anything. And then it's like, oh, she just missed the shot. There was no like real reason, I think, that she missed the shot. Like, I don't know. It was just a bit of a strange move. Like, you could have had Clint do something so that she missed, or Kate do something. It seemed like she just missed because Clint moved, which is like, come on, man. And again, I figured she was like at least maybe repelled into the building, but no, she just repelled down to the ground. But following quickly behind her, repelling down, is going to be Kate. She very interestingly kind of gets like basically just wings it and kind of slides down to the floor as well. But she is okay. It's at that moment that she does reach the ground that the tracksuit mafia show up. But who's there to save the day? Jack! Yeah. So Jack is there with the sword, fighting off tracksuit mafia and helping her. Again, he kind of becomes a swordsman, but also he's kind of a good guy, which is fun. I like that little bit of a subversion. I will say as well, we meet in like the third episode, I think it was. We had a tracksuit mafia member basically be like, oh, I have to take my girl for Imagine Dragons, and Kate was like, they suck. It was a random flyby. I don't know what the hate with Imagine Dragons is, but anyway, they went to Maroon 5, so Kate saved the relationship, but then they ended up fighting because he did have a gun. Clint fights off Kazi, but to escape the tracksuit mafia, he kind of has to jump out the window and land on the tree at Rockefeller Center. So this also has a very interesting Easter egg. It's not a Marvel Easter egg. There was an owl in that was found living in the Rockefeller Center tree a couple of years ago, and he sees the owl in there, which does pay off a little bit later on, but it is just a strange one. When I say the LARPers not really sure what their place was or their purpose, this is kind of what I mean. Like, we had that big kind of fight. Jack is there, Kate is there, and then the LARPers just suit up and start fighting, and I'm like, I'm glad they were against the tracksuit mafia, who have never been taken seriously as a threat anyway. They're kind of a comedic, bumbling henchman. If it was someone more serious, it would annoy me more. But again, it didn't bother me. It was just kind of like, well, there was very little purpose to them, aside from giving them the costume, which I think, maybe at one point it was going to be the full-on Hawkeye costume, but realistically, and again, this is what I'm going to, bring up now, because very shortly after we are going to see Clint's costume. And it's like, what is the benefit of him having a costume? Because, when you look at all the other costumes, it was like, oh, cool, that works, and there's probably benefits to this. At one point he's like, oh yeah, it's very stretchy and pliable and breathable, I guess. But I'm like, it is just a t-shirt with a logo, basically, seemingly. There's no real benefit to it. The helmet, at least, as ridiculous as it would look, I'd be like, hey, protects his head. Here it's like, oh, it's flexible, I guess. It's got a logo, which he doesn't really need. It was a very strange. I'm not going to say it's a strange inclusion, because we knew we were going to get it, but it was that kind of thing of like, logically in this universe, there's no benefit to that at all, aside from like a feel good bonding moment between him and Kate. But it is what it is. Again, maybe there was a moment where he was going to get the full on costume, and that's why the LARPers were in it, and they pulled back. I don't know. Probably not, though. It seems like if it would have been nixed very early on if that was the case. But anyway, before we're getting ahead of ourselves, Clint is still stuck in the tree. But Kate manages to free him. She shoots, or she frees the restraints that are holding the tree up and uses an acid arrow to make the tree fall over. So I get another trick arrow. She's also at this moment in FAO Schwartz, which, again, it's tying into the Christmas theme that's very prominent in Home Alone 2, which of course I know because I've seen all the Home Alones and reviewed them on the YouTube channel if you want to check them out. But also, I think is there a scene later on where there's an Easter egg to Big, I think, with Tom Hanks, because that was set there as well. The piano scene is there. I think there's a moment where you see a piano, maybe. I can't really remember. But it's only a tiny nod anyway. So Clint is now on the ice, the skating rink in Rockefeller Center, with the tree having collapsed. Kate is there to help him out. And they're firing all sorts of arrows. Electromagnetic arrow, which takes a lot of their guns away. He also gives all of the trick arrows to Kate. So again, it's that moment of like, you're the new Hawkeye. Take my bow, take my arrow, which we had before. Clint is also wearing the costume, as we mentioned. I don't know why, but he is. They're also using the bow a lot as a weapon, which is really good, because we only see that every now and then, but they're using it to kind of propel themselves, fight off things. And we also get that, like snap the bow into action, which we've seen before. Really cool. I will say, a lot of people, I've seen so much criticism of the fight scenes in this show, and in the Marvel shows in general. I think they're pretty good. I thought this was definitely... I think this show has probably had better fight scenes than a lot of the ones. Maybe it's just we've been spoiled with, the movie fight scenes, or maybe we've been spoiled with the Netflix shows having such good fight scenes, but I thought that was pretty good. We kind of get a slow-mo kind of back-to-back fighting moments, which are really cool. We have an airbag arrow, which is cool. Kate uses a shrinking arrow on a truck that's rushing towards them, which is, of course, a pin particle. These are color-coded as well, because we had a massive one before. We have a small one here. And we also kind of get something that I always thought about, which was like, when they're shrunk, like what does Scott do with them? Like, does he just put them somewhere safe and then like make them bigger? But we probably get one of the most terrifying deaths in the MCU, because our owl is back. Our owl then picks up the truck full of the tracksuit mafia and flies away with them. So presumably they were hacked to death or eaten by an owl. Oh, very Christmassy. Yeah, like that's one of the most horrifying deaths in the MCU. The other one I think is in Ant-Man. Where like like Darren Cross has that gun that turns this guy just into a throbbing pile of pink goo, where I'm like, oh, it's throbbing. Does that mean he's still alive? And then he wipes him off the floor and flushes him down a toilet. I'm like, that's the worst thing ever. That's so horrible if you really think about it. But yeah, the owl tracksuit mafia guys got the raw end of the stick, and I kind of felt bad for them, to be honest. But of course, we have a really cool other moment. We have a kind of, I guess you call it a split arrow, or cluster arrow. It's like an arrow that shoots in 3 parts. Which kills two of the tracksuit, or hits 2 of the tracksuit mafia. I don't know if we kill them. One is going for Kazi and he catches it, which made me go like, what? Why can he catch that? That seems like it would be very impossible for someone who is not a hero, but sure, fine, I'll allow it for the moment. At that moment, Yelena arrives to confront Kate, and of course, wouldn't you know it, Echo also shows up, this time to confront Kazi. So they're fighting, and Kingpin also eventually shows up in a sec, meaning that all of our kind of heroes, I guess, are busy. So Clint is fighting Yelena, Kate is fighting Kingpin, and Echo is fighting Kazi. So it's like a 3-way fight we have going on. So we have Yelena and the Clint fight. I would say this was a little bit underwhelming. The fight was... The thing is, we know how this was going to end. We always did know how it was going to end. And I guess that's the only reason I wasn't disappointed, because it was very obvious it was always going to end this way. If I expected anything from it, I would be disappointed. That picture of that meme from Malcolm in the Middle, where it's like, I expected nothing and I'm still disappointed. It's sort of like that to me. I didn't expect anything from this because I knew how it was going to end. So I can't be disappointed. So I guess it's not like the Malcolm in the Middle one, in that I'm not disappointed. But it's, it was okay, I guess. It's like, what happened? Tell me what happened. Clint says, like, if I tell you what happened, you won't believe me anyway. She sacrificed herself for the world. Yelena doesn't believe him. Yada, yada, yada. We'll come back to them in a sec. Kingpin has shown up, as I mentioned. It's like a fashion show. Kingpin fashion. Fisk fashion. Because he's got all sorts of different clothes on. He had his tuxedo and his diamond cane. Now, he's wearing a lovely Hawaiian shirt get-up. with a complete with hat. Now with a new hat, like Malibu Stacy. It's interesting because some people were taking the piss out of this online. It is from a comic. It's from Spider-Man Family Business, I think. I remember I have the cover in my head. Because when I saw it, I was like, I've seen that comic. What comic is that? But the internet did the footwork there for me. Yeah, looking very snazzy there, Mr. D'Onofrio. So, a bit of a fashion show. He's got a hat and a jacket. He's fighting away. Eleanor tries to escape, but Fisk confronts her. He tears the door off the car. So, again, he's got a bit more strength. He's got a bit more resilience in the MCU. I don't think he'd be able to do that in the Netflix show. Kate has a bow drawn on him, and she shoots him with an arrow. He snaps it off, and it's totally fine. Eleanor then runs him over with a car, which sends him flying through the window of FAO Schwartz. Echo is trying to convince Kazi to be on her side, but Kazi won't. They struggle, and Echo ends up stabbing Kazi because Kazi picked up an arrow from one of the men that Hawkeye shot, runs towards her with the arrow, and Echo confronts him, doesn't confront him, she reverses it, I guess, and he manages to stab him with the arrow. Again, it felt like a kind of a lower stakes fight, to be honest. It's not that I don't feel like they established their relationship very well. It just kind of felt like she has no real reason to be fighting him except he's going to kill her, which is pretty shallow stakes because we always know how it was going to end that way as well. And I think that's the problem with all these fights, really. We kind of knew where it was going to go, which, is true in a lot of superhero stuff. But here it just felt like, we know that Yelena and Clint is going to resolve with her being like, oh, your sister loved you, and we're good friends, and we knew that Echo wasn't going to die, the question of whether Kazi was going to die, I don't think it really mattered because he doesn't have a place in the MCU going forward, so he probably was going to die. But yeah, we have a big fight going on, still in FO Schwartz, between Kate and Kingpin. It's going back and forth. It is pretty interesting. And I will say, I think he fights differently than he did in Daredevil. Again, it is leading to his strength. And I think he's probably less brutal, but he's more resilient, and he does have a kind of a sense that he's larger than life does. I think the problem with a lot of the fight scenes in superhero stuff is that it can feel a little bit weightless. And it kind of did feel like that a little bit, and I think that's the problem with a character like Kingpin in general you're going to run into. You either make him super realistic and brutal, or if you lean into the comic book stuff, like, I think in the comics he's like 100% muscle or something something ridiculous. Maybe that was the older versions. So he should be entirely resilient, which just kind of feels a little bit silly at times, and it can lead to that. But at one point he grabs all her trick arrows and snaps them, which we have a cool moment. There's and again, this is actually something that does tie into the Daredevil canon that we established in the Netflix show. So he snaps all her trick arrows. They've been fighting. She managed to grab one of his cufflinks. Now his cufflinks have been prominent in the Netflix Daredevil show. It was given to him by his father, but it is the same cufflink. So probably the same character, or again, they're being very selective in what they bring over. But she does what Hawkeye showed her do with the coin, and uses that cufflink to set off an explosive trick arrow and go off in his face, and he's seemingly defeated, or at least momentarily. Back on the ice, Yelena and Clint are fighting. You know, it's still that thing of, oh, she sacrificed herself, oh, she would never do that, blah. And he's like, I tried to stop her, but she beat me. And Yelena's like, you should have fought harder. And she's like, Yelena, we both know that when she sets her mind to it, no one could have done it, you know. Basically, no one could have stopped her from doing what she did. She has a gun drawn on him, and at that moment we get the whistle that we had established in Black Widow between the Black Widows, between Yelena and Natasha. I can't actually remember. I was going to do it, but I was going to do it, and then I realized I was going to go, which is the Hunger Games thing. Which, yeah, Clint wouldn't be very happy to be compared to Katniss once again, would he? So I can't remember with the whistle, but I'll probably put it in here somewhere. It doesn't matter. I heard a friend of mine describe this as the Martha moment, which, yeah, a little bit. It was always going to go that way. It's probably, I mean, I guess there was it's not as bad as the Martha moment, but because it does feel a bit personal, and it is something that was established long ago, and it was a nice callback, I guess. So it wasn't just random trivia, but you know, it's could be a little bit disappointed. I get it, but yeah. Anyway, Kate talks to her mother. She basically says, like, don't matter what you did like, she's trying to defend her actions, and it's like, hey, look, either way, what you did was wrong. And she has her mother arrested for the murder of Armand III. So I guess Jack was just a nice, sweet guy who liked butterscotch. What a lovely man. Yeah, so that's what we have here anyway. Yelena is kind of broken down when she hears the whistle, and she's annoyed that Clint got so much time with her, and she basically never did. She doesn't say that, but it's very obvious. And she insists that, you know, you could have stopped her. No one would have stopped her, though. And they both say, like, hey, I loved Natasha. Yelena helps him to his feet. And, you know, that's kind of it, I think, with Yelena. The Kingpin has survived, seemingly, because the police come in and they're like, oh, he's gone. Where is he gone? Which, you know, we kind of expect was going to be the case. He survived. But did he survive, though? Because in a moment later on, we see that he's kind of stumbling away from the battle, and he's confronted by Maya, Echo. And he's like, Maya, I love you, you know, blah, blah, blah. You're like a daughter to me, blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, we get a pan up, because Echo has a gun drawn on him. It pans up so we don't see the action, and we hear, blam, kapowie, shoot, somebody shot the gun. Oh my, that's it for Kingpin. He's dead. But he's probably not. I mean, few things. Number one, if he was dead, they would have shown him being shot and very clearly dead. But they deliberately didn't do that. So I guess this was kind of a thing of, we'll see how people react. If people like it, we'll bring it back. If not, we won't bring it back. They deliberately left it ambiguous. The other thing is, I mean, considering what we've seen him survive, I wouldn't be surprising if this Kingpin could survive a bullet anyway. In the comics, this does happen, and she shoots out both of his eyes, leaving him blinded, which is very ironic considering, you know, he's generally a daredevil foe who's also blind. So yeah, I don't think they're going to go that route because, I mean, eventually, let's be honest, comic books and to a lesser extent comic book movies and TV shows are all about being able to retroactively bring everything back to the regular continuity, reset everything. And it would just lead to a point where eventually he's like, hey, he's got bionic eyes. I think he got an eye transplant in the comics, which is a bit silly. So why would you do it at all? I guess he'll just be shot and survive. But we don't really know. Either way, I don't think this is the last we'd see of Kingpin, as we'll get into in a minute. But after all that, another fun moment is the LARPers are trying to convince Jack to join LARPing, which is fun. I'd like to see that. I don't think we'll ever see Jack again, but, you know, I hope he gets to join those LARPers. That'd be fun. Clint has that moment where he tells her that he's proud of her. And, you know, later on he kind of called, or earlier on he called her a partner. And again, it's that symmetry between this and episode 3, where they're on the subway and, you know, he says something to her, but he doesn't hear her because he doesn't have a hearing aid in. And then he goes, we should walk the dog. But here he tells her he's proud of her very genuinely. They both react and talk to each other. And they both feel that motion and that moment and that connection. And then he says, we should probably walk that dog. Which, by the way, the dog is now officially called Lucky. I don't think they called him Lucky up to this point. I've been calling him Lucky because that's what he's called in the comics, Pizza Dog or Lucky. But a Christmas miracle. All this time we've been saying we hope that Clint is going to be driving home for Christmas. And he is. He drove home for Christmas. But he didn't drive alone. He brought Kate with him back to the Barton farm. Is that what it's called? Back to the farmhouse, back to his family for Christmas, so she doesn't spend Christmas alone. So I guess Jack is like, what the fuck, man? I have to spend Christmas alone, I guess. Because, you know, my surrogate stepdaughter, I guess, now is gone. And my fiance is in jail. So I don't know, I guess, he's rich. I'm sure he'll spend it with the rest of that intolerable family. Seemingly he's the only good one. But yeah, they get home to the Barons for Christmas. And he gives Laura the watch. As we kind of suspected, the watch belongs to her. And as I also suspected, she was a former agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, you know, it would establish her connection to Clint, how they met, and how she knows Natasha as well. But this is also a very interesting one, because the watch has the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. logo, or the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo, I guess. And it has the number 19 on it. Now, I've seen a lot of discussion on this. Some people acting like it's the end of the world, because Agent 19 is the code name for Mockingbird, which, you know, I think a lot of us kind of suspected that she could have been Mockingbird in a former life. And it was kind of a shame that if she was, there wasn't the moment where people tried to attack her at the farm. We got to see her use some of her skills, really, which is a bit of a shame. But the thing is, this is a couple of things. Agent 19 is Mockingbird in the comics. I don't believe Mockingbird, played by Adrian Palicki in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., was ever called Agent 19. Bobby Morse, I don't think she ever was, as far as I know. So some people are saying, like, oh, this is it. They've written out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from continuity. And I don't think they necessarily have here. But I also don't think it matters, because unless they directly bring in something from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's not in continuity, really. I mean, it's kind of that loose continuity where if you want to accept it as part of the continuity, you can. But if you don't want to accept it as part of continuity, you also don't have to. Like, especially like the early seasons of it had a very loose connection. Later seasons of it just did its own thing. But, you know, are we going to see, you know, was it Gabriel Luna back as Ghost Rider and things like that eventually somewhere down the road? Possibly not anyway. If they want to bring in Ghost Rider, they'd probably bring in, you know, their own Ghost Rider playing Johnny Blaze. And Johnny Blaze did have a cameo in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but is that ever going to happen? Probably not. I mean, the Darkhold is in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's also, you know, in WandaVision and looks totally different. So it's a very loose degree of continuity, which has always been the case anyway, so I don't think it's a reason to fret. Not that I think many people are. As I said, maybe Clark Gregg and his two mates are like, oh no, I don't know why I'm taking shots at Clark Gregg or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I like that show, but still. Yeah, we also get a moment where they burn the Ronin costume in a symbolic thing, and Kate helps. So that's cool, I guess. I mean, someone could just make another Ronin costume, I guess, if they really need it. But how much more do you really need to do with Ronin beyond that? But that's it. Except for the moment where we kind of unofficially get the passing of the mantle, because Kate and Clint are a team, of course, and Kate's like, hey, I've been thinking of some names. Lady Hawk, which actually was a name that they ran with her in the comics at one point, as far as I remember. Hawk Eve. And then she said, then at one point, I think he says, I got an idea. Hawkeye title shows up. So yeah, guess what? She's Hawkeye. Which is weird because I think a lot of us expected the passing of the mantle. This is what that was designed for. But I didn't know if this was going to be like, oh, Clint has retired. I don't know. So we kind of have two Hawkeyes now, I guess. Until Clint dies, which he probably will in his next installment, to be honest. That was it for the show. We got a mid-credit scene, which a lot of people are going to be disappointed with, and I wouldn't, yeah, I might be in that camp partially. It says, Happy Holidays from Marvel Studios, and it was just a musical sequence from Rogers the Musical, which was really fun, and actually kind of catchy, but that's it. You could have given us something, but that's it. That's a wrap on Hawkeye. Which, giving my thoughts overall on the show, I had the highest of highs, and then some episodes that I found a bit slow and underwhelming. Overall, I thought it was probably the most consistent of the MCU shows, though. Maybe aside from WandaVision. WandaVision had high highs, and then there was a few episodes where it is nothing. And I would say that some of WandaVision feels undone because of its ending, which Hawkeye doesn't. It was just a very obvious ending. I think I could have written this finale myself and had the exact predictions correct, And I think aside from that, the question kind of becomes, did it stick the landing? Yes. Was it a good show overall? Yes. Even the slower episodes I didn't dislike. It felt like they had crucial character moments that will pay off down the line, especially for Yelena and Kate. It did some important things that it needed to do. I think like when we look back at the legacy of all these shows, they all need to accomplish a certain thing. WandaVision needed to get Wanda, to kind of, I suppose, mess with the multiverse, kind of become a bit more of a darker character, and also become the Scarlet Witch from the comics, which they achieved. They gave her a name, Scarlet Witch. She has a new costume. We're going to see the follow of that in the next Doctor Strange movie. Falcon and the Winter Soldier needed to get, the Falcon to become the new Captain America, and they achieved that. Loki needed to kind of tease the possibility of the multiverse a bit more, and the fact that it was open. Again, whether or not it did that, or whether that's been done in subsequent things, is kind of still questionable, but it also needs to introduce Kang the Conqueror into the MCU. It did that. What was the purpose of Hawkeye? Purpose of Hawkeye was to set up the new Hawkeye, and also kind of maybe show us a bit of the Young Avengers kind of slowly forming with Yelena and Kate. But it also seemingly had the purpose of bringing in the Netflix shows. Again, baby steps. We don't know how much they're bringing in, but it accomplished that. Again, the 6 episodes here really worked. I thought these blew by, whereas I think the kind of 6 episodes of Falcon and the Soldier, sometimes I felt it dragged. Same with Loki to a certain degree. And WandaVision had the 9 episodes, which I thought were fine. I thought it was well paced. But this feels like it never overstayed its welcome. Are we going to get a season 2? Probably not. Mainly because the slate is so full. And I don't know really what you would do with a season 2. They pretty much use up a lot of the Matt Fraction run in this show. And I don't know what they would really need to do aside from it. Hey, Kate Bishop is being Hawkeye. But you can do that in the MCU anyway. So I think it's been a one and done. And I think it's been done very well. I've really enjoyed it. But the question then is, where do we see these characters next? Where are we going to get Clint next? Where are we going to get Kate Bishop next? And it's strange because Hawkeye has always been such a kind of a tertiary member of the Avengers that it feels like he only shows up for the big ones, so I mean, I guess the next Avengers or whatever the big crossover movie is going to be, but in the comics he's often very supportive of the Young Avengers, and he's the only one who's really mentored someone to be a Young Avenger. We have a lot of characters that have been potential Avengers, especially in the Disney Plus shows. It really seems that's what they're building towards. We had Wiccan and we had Speed. We had someone who became Patriot, but again, he didn't feel like he was fully formed or going to really get to that point. But we do have another young Avenger, Cassie Lang in Ant-Man 3. There are rumors that Kate Bishop is going to show up in Quantumania. I think that would make the most sense for her next appearance. Again, we don't know, is this building though to a Young Avengers? Or if we are, we're certainly still very far away from it. But we also don't know when the next Avengers is coming. We're in a process of rebuilding for the MCU. So it's really still hard to say where Clint or Kate show up again. But I think we're probably going to see Kate before we see Clint again. I don't think we're going to see Clint for a while. Until we get another big crossover event, possibly. As for the other character, that I think the only other character we probably should mention, that because I think the other ones really, if they show up, it'll be, a wink and a nudge very briefly. Where's Kingpin going to show up? We all suspected Echo. I mean, that's why I haven't mentioned where Echo is going to show up, because she's getting her own show. That's where she will show up. A lot of people have suggested that that's going to be, the reboot of the Netflix shows. I don't think you can have Echo without having Kingpin. If Kingpin's going to show up, he needs to show up in Echo. But is it going to be like he shows up very briefly at the end to be like, I'm alive, haha? Or is it going to be, he straight away the next episode is dealing with that ramification? Will we see what happened in that alley? Who knows? And I think that, could possibly lead to Daredevil and a lot of Netflix shows becoming canon in Echo, as a lot of people have suspected. But that's it. That's what we got out of Hawkeye. That's talk about season 2. Let's talk about season 1, what I enjoyed about it. That's where we're going to see these characters again, in my opinion, my prediction. So I guess the question then becomes, what's next for us? Because as I mentioned, we're doing The Watcher about a year now, and we're going to keep it going with the Disney Plus shows. But this is also where we run into problems, because who knows when any of the rest of the stuff is coming out. Next year, what we expect to come out of the Netflix shows is Moon Knight, Secret Invasion, She-Hulk, and Miss Marvel. But the other thing is that the only one with like a confirmed date is Miss Marvel. It's like a mid-2022. So, I don't know, is the honest question. I'm not sure when we're going to do more of The Watcher. Of course, it's not strictly stuck to Marvel shows as well, but I don't think I'm going to do Peacemaker. I'm not, because I feel like that's not. I feel like that's going to be very surface level, not much a lot to dissect personally. I don't think I'm going to do Boba Fett, because honestly, as much as I like Star Wars, I don't feel like I have any real insider expertise or as much interest as I do in the Marvel stuff or the DC stuff. So I don't know when The Watcher is going to come back, but if you want to make sure you don't miss it, be sure to press subscribe. We'll probably do more Rewatcher, which is when we look back at movies. We've done Fantastic Four, we've done Punisher. We started Twilight and never finished it, but I'm sure we'll go back to that at some point. Maybe we'll do it every now and then when I need to put something out. But yeah, we will return. That's all you need to know, I suppose. Either way, I've been your cult leader, Tom Pot. Please subscribe and like so you don't miss when we come back next time. And I don't know when that is, but you can be sure when you do come back, just remember, I'll be watching. Take care.